PTC Creo splash screen and Resource Center. You might want to click the Show Me, especially when you install it at home, but for the moment we'll do No Start Working, and we can close this too. Once you've started working on files, you can open the last session you worked on, but we want to start off by selecting the working directory, clicking on this button here. This will open up your file browser. I'm just going to set us up where we're at. The test folder. In this test folder I've got a folder called House. Okay. Every file I make now will be saved back in that folder. I can put resources in that folder I might want to use later, images for example. So now we've set the working folder, we can make a new file, and I'll call this Demo House. Notice I've put a dash in here. Creo doesn't like spaces in names, and I've got part selected. We're going to make a full 3D solid part. And we're going to use the default template, and that'll make sure that things are in millimeters, meters, kilometers and seconds for angles. This is the default working screen. We've got the simplified schools menu here, which makes getting started a lot easier. We've got a trimetric view showing a front datum plane, a right or a side datum plane, and a top and bottom datum plane, just so we've got some way of orientating ourselves in 3D space. We can manipulate views in a number of ways. This little toolbar here, this middle one, will let us change the orientation. So we can look in isometric, which isn't always that helpful when you're starting up. Standard orientation, which is that slightly tipped one. Trimetric, whatever. So this is where we're going to create our house shape. House is going to be roughly 90 long, 40 wide and 90 high. Okay. To do that, we need to make a drawing, like a plan drawing, of how long and wide the house is, and we'll then extrude that profile into 3D to give it the height. So the tool we need is an extrude. Notice that the placement is in red here. We need to tell Creo that we want to start making a drawing on this datum plane, the top one. We can either mouse over this and click on it, or click on top in the model tree. So clicking on top, and we're given a flat on view, a two-dimensional view, an orthographic view. We want to draw a rectangle, so I'm going to use this center rectangle, click it more or less on the center and drag out to make a shape. Not too worried about sizes right now. Let's just plop this back into a standard view, or the default orientation, or even isometric. You can see now in our 3D world we've got a basic rectangle drawn, and we're quite happy with this sketch. It meets all the criteria for a sketch, so we can go OK. The program's automatically assigned a height to it and given us a 3D block. We can drag this around, sometimes useful if you want to play with proportions, or we can type in directly the height we wanted, which was 90. Okay, so we can OK that. We've set our first measurement. We can use the refit tool just to bring that so it fits the screen nicely. I want to set this width, this length. It's all held in this extrude part in the model tree, and if we click on this, we can see the section that we drew, and we can edit it using this little icon. We've got two measurements in here that are way over what we want. I'm going to use the normal tool and double click on this and set that to 40, and double click on this and set it to 90. That's better proportions. If I put this in one of the views, so we can now see how long and how wide it is. When I OK this, as we've already put measurements into the extrude, we can see our proportions. Now, every good house needs a roof. I'm going to just take this edge off and that edge off with a chamfer, so I click on the chamfer. Notice as I move my mouse over the different surfaces and edges that they highlight in green. So I want to click on that edge. I'm going to hold down the Control key on my keyboard and click on this edge. So they're both selected. I can drag this till they meet or past meeting. Yeah. But if this is 40 wide, I want that on 20, and I can go and apply the changes I want. And now I've got a basic house shape. I'm going to hold down the scroll wheel. If I roll the scroll wheel, I can zoom in and out, but if I press it down and move my mouse around, I can rotate the shape, because I want to hollow it out from here, and I'm going to use the shell command to do that. So I select shell, and again that needs to be placed, so I can click on it here. I'm going to set 1mm as though we're modelling this out of card, and once I've set that, by pressing the enter key on my keyboard, I can then apply it, and there we have the shape. So let's pop this back the way we want and zoom it to fit. At this point I can get rid of all these construction guides because we don't really need them. What the house needs though is a door and a window. Again, I can do that by, I'm going to make this the front, I can extrude a rectangle on here to make a door and another one for a window. So extrude tool, placement is in red, it needs to know where we want to work, so we're going to click on the front wall, and that's flipped towards us again. I don't really want to draw a center rectangle, so if I use the More tool here, I can choose different things, use this flyout to get a corner rectangle. Notice this blue line here, my cursor's snapping to that, so I can click and then drag up something like that to make myself a door. I want the window that's about down here, comes up as high as the door. Notice the green tags there that are showing that they're on the same at the same point, and I'll click it again to set that one there. I'm happy with my sketch, so I can OK that. If I just pop this into 3D again, you can see it's extruded those two rectangles out. I can use this button here to make this arrow go the other way, as it were, so it goes in. And Creo's smart enough to know that we want to go in that way and remove material. So I can just OK that, readjust it, and there is my basic house. So I should save this again as demo house. It's in the house folder, in the test folder, in the product, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, that's a nice quick model. We need some output from that. We're not going to 3D print it or anything, but we might want to make a drawing. So we need to make a new file. This time, in the new dialog box, we're going to pick drawing and call it demo-house. Because this is a different type of file, it can have the same name. For ease sake, we're going to pick A4, and we'll use a template, and we'll click OK. And we get a drawing that shows a rendered isometric view the front and the plan view. Here it says it's drawn at a scale of 1 to 2. I can double click on this and put a value in there and check it, and suddenly it's actual size. So this is out of the reference frame. Unlock that and I can pick this up, bring it in. There we go. For our second piece of 3D modelling, let's try something a little more complicated. We're going to do a basic stool. It's about 600 high, got 4 legs, a simple wooden top and some bracing. So I can select the working directory as before in test, but I'm going to make a new folder this time. I'll call it stool. Click OK. OK again. Now I'm going to make a new part again, and I'll call it stool dash legs. Remember, we can't have spaces in Creo names. I'm going to use a technique called sweep. Sweep is where you take a shape and pass it along a line or a sketch. So I start off this process with a sketch. If I just click on sketch, it doesn't know where we want it. So as I've not got my planes on view at the moment, I'm just going to click on front. Notice it's in there now, and I can sketch, and we get rotated flat onto the sketch view. As mentioned already, we want a line at 600 horizontally from the baseline. So I'm going to put that line in there, and while I'm here I'm going to put in another line on this line so that I've got a vertical line, because I'm going to draw half of the leg and mirror it around this line. I can then sketch in a leg or half a leg, something like that, to there. I'm going to use the normal command because now we can see that that isn't 600, so let's change that to 600 and zoom to fit. And this one, well, it's going to be a very narrow top stool, so let's make that 80, and that's all looking good. If we make this 85, brings it a bit closer to vertical, but we've got that stability of it splaying out. In fact, let's make this 120, and you can see that this measurement has changed, but this is still at 85 degrees. I'm going to use the 1 by 1 or the selection arrow and drag around everything. Creo knows we've got some lines selected, and the mirror command's available now, and we can click on this line here and it's mirrored everything around that. It would have been nice, actually, thinking about it, if we just zoom in on this area to put a fillet, which is a curve, between those two lines. Notice it's not repeated on that side, and put that in, and notice that these aren't the same two sizes. Later on we'll talk about controlling dimensions, but let's just make this 30 on both of them for the time being. Okay. Occasionally things like this happen, so it's probably just best to delete everything. You need to be careful when you're doing this though, because, and here I'm just going to draw a bounding box and hit the delete key on the keyboard, and I've still got a marker in there that I need to delete because it's that line there. So I want to set that to 120. Okay, so zoom in and just delete that piece of line as well. When things go wrong, it's often as effective to redo the whole process rather than try to correct errors that have gone on. Okay, we have a line missing here, but we can just snap that line in, and we still need to use the delete segment tool to get rid of that bit and that bit. Okay, now that's our sketch. I'm going to go OK. And if we pop that into an isometric view and zoom to fit, we can see it's coming up at an angle, going across and going down. The leg for our stool is going to be made out of pretty standard 25mm diameter tubing with a 2mm wall thickness, maybe even a 1mm wall thickness. And I want to sweep that profile along this line to make a 3D shape. So I'm going to use the sweep command. Notice this is green. If for some reason you've clicked off and it's gone blue, no worries. You can either select sketch here, you can see it pre-highlights in a green color, or click on it in the working area. So that's selected, we click sweep. Creo knows that this is the path we want to sweep along now, and we want to make a solid object, not a surface, but we need to make the section that's going to be swept along that line. Where these two lines intersect is at the end of the leg, and I'm just going to draw a circle in there and use the normal tool to set the measurement to 25. I'll zoom in a bit on that now. I'm going to draw a second circle, and I'm going to make the measurement of that 23. So it's 1mm thickness. Just zoom out again so you can see what we've got. So now we've got those two concentric circles drawn at the end of the sketch that we made. I'm happy with the sketches I've added to that path line, so I'm going to click OK, and hopefully you can see that's now produced a solid 3D shape, well, a solid tube in fact. So I'm happy with that. Click that. Let's pop it into isometric, zoom to fit, and that's the legs done. So I'm going to save that. Okay. Right. We want to add that to an assembly. An assembly file is quite an important concept, and it's one that you need to get your head around quite quickly. So we're going to make a new file, and it's going to be an assembly. A part file is one lump of material, if you like. It's the legs that we've made, the bent tube for the legs. The stool's made up of a number of parts and an assembly. So we're going to call this assembly stool and click OK. We get a blank screen. Let's pop the work planes in so we can see what we're doing. And I want to assemble the legs in. Okay, so to put the first set in, just to make this easy, I'm going to roughly place that there, and I'm going to click down all the way down here and pick default, and that's placed it very nicely for us. Notice it's gone gold to show it's good, and we can click that. Right, let's pop into isometric. I need another set of legs parallel to these, offset by about 120. So I'm going to assemble them in using the same file. And this time, instead of using the default setting, I'm going to take that work plane there and the one that matches it on the other pair of legs and make it coincident. So this plane and that plane is lining up. It may not look like it in your view, but if you rotate it, it is. It would be quite useful now to make this work plane match that one by being coincident. Let's check that. And finally, I'm going to use that work plane or datum plane and that one. And I'm going to use a distance measurement. I can drag that if I'm not sure what I want. Obviously a bit narrow and unstable. We're not making a bench, we want to make a stool. So maybe about 200. Maybe go with the 220 that I space the legs apart. It's a bit hard to drag it precisely, so I can either click in here and do 220, or I could have double clicked on under the numbers there, but it gets a bit difficult to see. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to do this, and now I've got my legs matched up. Okay, I'm going to save that. Stool assembly. Now, every good stool needs something to sit on, so I'm now going to make a top part. We know that we need to make something roughly 300 square or circular to go onto it. I'm going to make something circular just so I can show you another construction technique. So I'm going to do new, onto part, and we'll call it seat, and I'll click OK. I want to make a round, a circular seat for the stool. For that I'm going to use the revolve command. And when I click on it, notice the red placement has come up. I've not at the moment got any planes displayed. If I click on front here, we'll make a sketch. Now I'm going to put in a center line because revolve needs to know the line it's going to spin the shape around, just like mirror needed to know. And I'm going to draw in another center line about here that's vertical, so they're parallel. I'm just going to put a measurement in of 150, so that I've got roughly something 300. If you had an awkward figure, I don't, but if I had an awkward figure, I could type that figure in and do divide by 2, and the maths engine that sits underneath of Creo would do that for me nicely. Now, I'm going to have a very slight flat bit on my stool, but then I want something that's going to curve up gently and roll over the edge. I can't do that with a straight line drawing tool, so if I just press the middle wheel on my mouse, I can end the straight line drawing tool, I can go to more, and I can pick up spline. I'm going to snap to that point and start drawing, and it looks like I've just got a line drawing tool, but if I'm going to put a slight lift up here, another slight lift, and then start curving it down, and you can see how the program is interpolating the points with a curve. And I'm going to stop that, I'm going to bring that to around a little, and then again using the wheel, pressing the wheel at that point to stop the creation process. Okay, now I want to make this spin around this point. It's not going to give me a solid object, so I need to make a second line, and I'm going to do that with the more command and use offset. This is picks this all up as one single chain. The arrow here is going this side. I want to go the other side, and I want to make that about 5mm thick, so I'm going to type -5 and click OK, and we get a line parallel for most of it. I'm going to just roll the mouse wheel over here and use the line command and snap a point between those two. Just click on the scroll wheel, draw a line here that's horizontal, pass the line a little bit, and pass the line a little bit, then use the trim tool, delete segments to get rid of that little piece and that little piece. I've now got a closed set of lines that are more or less the shape I want within my 300 target size. If I put that in 3D a little, or pop it even into an isometric view, hopefully you'll see what's going to go on. So I'm happy with that sketch, and Revolve spins it automatically through 360, and I've got like a slightly nicely shaped frisbee, really. Not the world's prettiest stool top, but it'll do for the demonstration. I can put in a measurement there, or I can drag this. I could do half of the stool, do bicycle seat proportions, yeah, and so on and so forth. It can be hard getting the 360, so type that in. If I'm happy with that, there we go, there's my stool. So let's save that. Seat. Okay, that's it out of the view. So there we go. A slightly more complex shape with another construction technique. I want to go back to using the Windows button here to the stool assembly, because what I'm going to do now, of course, is assemble the stool in with the seat section. Open that and roughly position it, which might take a few bits of dragging it around with these markers. Sometimes it's a bit hard to drag it in 3D. This is where maybe looking at it from the bottom would be good. So I can now center it up this way, center it up this way. You can see that we're coming now, so let's have a look at it from the front. That's not bad, is it? Yeah. There's not much I can actually line up with, is there? And also, I don't know, these bits of the stool that stick out, even if we maybe moved it up here and made some holes through, it's not that stylish, but we'll just go okay for that at the moment. Have a look at the isometric view. Okay, well, it's starting to look a bit like a stool. We can make our imaginings a bit clearer by clicking on the render button. Appearance gallery. Clicking on that to open it up. We can go for a standard metal. We don't need anything fancy right now. Standard metal, maybe a bit of chrome on the legs. Hold down the control key to get the other legs. Click OK up in here to set it. And let's give the top, what should we go for? A nice purple color. I can select it like this, or I can select it in the model tree, but I need to OK to set that. So now we're getting something that looks a little more stool-like. I think I'd like that lid a bit bigger. Okay, so let's just save that. I could flick back to the seat drawing. Notice that's not being coloured, but that wouldn't, it would still be guesstimating it. What I can do in here is I can right click, activate, and now I can see the relationship to the other parts in here, but I can edit the revolve, and I actually want the section in the revolve is what I want to change the definition of. And now when I look at this, you can see that it's alright on this dimension. If we look at it from the front, from the left, it's not, when it's going around there, it's not coming out far enough. We need to actually think that this measurement here is bigger. If we look at it from the top, maybe that might show it better. Yeah, we're stopping here, so when we swing round, we're clipping that. So if we look flat onto the sketch and zoom ourselves back in, I'm going to just change this measurement to 200. Okay, notice immediately we have a minor problem there, that this has ballooned out and these points being fixed from each other have changed slightly. We can drag bits around until we get it more or less right. Now for the time being, the fact that it's slightly off, I'm not going to let it worry me. In actual fact, I can pick this up now and let's move this all back in. You have to be a little bit careful, but you can feel your way around what a design might be wanting. Okay, I've got a little point left behind here, let's bring that back. And go for that just for the time being. Okay, that. And now we're getting it capping over the legs a little more like we might expect. So, starting to demonstrate elements of Creo where it can actually be used as a design tool to help you solve some of the problems. Okay, so if we're happy with that, we can go back to the whole assembly and activate that. Right, so let's save that. There's obviously items we could add to it, but right now we just want to get some kind of output. I could make a drawing, but I think what might be quite nice is if we make a render. I might take a photograph of it. So in the render bit, click on render and a window will pop up in a moment with the rendered stool in it. That's a very, very quick render done in draft, but it gives an idea. We can play with this a little bit with setup. Let's change it to maximum. A couple of other things. Watermark, take that off for the time being. Output as a JPEG. Check it's going into the default directory. Set a moderate size. So the size is reflected here. It's about laptop resolution. The other bits leave for the time being. Close that. You might even want a perspective view. Perspective views supposedly a bit more realistic. Give that a quick render. You'll notice immediately that the time for the render to work is a lot longer because it's calculating a whole lot more photons bouncing around inside the virtual world to give you a rendition. It's alright, I won't make you watch the whole thing, I'll edit out it. But it's on step 3, so in a minute it should pop up. We now have a much larger rendering to look at. Let's open this out a little. And notice also that it's put a background in. We've got a nice glossy finish there that's reflecting the highlights and everything. It's still not a brilliant design, but it looks a whole lot nicer. Okay, save that and we'll end that there.